Thank you so much. And it's such an honor always to present to this group. So I'm very grateful to have this opportunity. So let me begin by asking you guys a couple of questions. If you were to see a post from a close other about an innovative product versus from a distant other about an innovative product, which of these two posts would be more likely to get you to want to buy that innovative product? Those of you who think the close other post, raise your hand. So I see a majority, but it's nice to see there are some who think it's actually going to be the post from the distant other, and the post from the close other might reduce the desire for this innovative product. Second question, what if you saw this post? Now, when we go online, when we go on Facebook, we see a lot of posts from, we usually self-select to see posts from close others, and often these are relevant posts. And suppose this person is a real influencer, constantly humble bragging about these innovative products that they've bought all the time. Now we see all these products, and after that we decide to go for a bout of online shopping. How likely do you think seeing all these posts from this close other versus maybe a not close other, would they influence the kind of choices you make later on in your shopping excursion online? Would you be more likely to go ahead and maybe buy innovative products? No? Would they not influence at all? That seems very logical. Good. So now this is the research. Actually, I'm not the expert in this. It is Chelsea. It is her dissertation research with me. And in this, we're going to present two what I think are very counterintuitive results. The first is that if we see a post from a close other rather than a distant other, we are less likely to go ahead and buy that innovative product. And second, when we see a post from a close rather than a distant other, and then are provided with other innovative products, we become less likely to also try and buy those products. And I'm going to give you a little bit of the intuition as I go along with this, but I wanted to set up the question and get you thinking about when and why that might happen. So companies use social media to promote their products all the time. And indeed, they do this because they think that they can create a lot of positive word of mouth. And they, of course, especially when it's an innovative product in which they spend billions, probably millions, if not billions of dollars to actually come up with these products, it's really important to go ahead and actually get the right set of consumers to start thinking about and adopting these products. Apple Watch did that, and what is interesting about this is that after they posted it, they did this sometime in November, so it was the holiday season. That's why you see that they're trying to encourage people to actually gift this product. But what is interesting here is that within 17 hours of going ahead and putting this up, they had about 335,000 views already. So indeed, it seems that when they go ahead and use social media to promote their products, people actually go ahead and view those posts. Now, how does that influence their preference for these kind of products and also for other kind of products? And does it matter whether they actually end up associating this post with a close or a distant other? A lot of the literature would suggest that, well, the literature wouldn't suggest, but one of the things that we do when we go online and we start looking at social media posts is we almost automatically start comparing with these others. If someone posts or humble brags about a product, we start thinking about, well, you know, they have that, but so what? I mean, how am I really different? Or what is mine? Do I want this product? We start socially comparing with these with these people. Now, when we engage in social comparison, a lot of the literature suggests that regardless of whether it's social comparison or comparison with any product, between two products, for example, between two people, or ourselves with someone else, what happens when we compare is we start trying to think of differences. It's very natural for us, I mean, almost by definition, comparison means that I have to think of how I am different from someone else, or how one product is different from another product. And so it's basically a process of differentiation. So if social comparison, and that's what psychology would suggest, leads to this process of differentiation, then differentiation or a focus on differences could go ahead and increase the breadth of thoughts that are coming to our mind. Because after all, if we are trying to differentiate, we have to go beyond the straight and narrow, beyond the things that immediately come to mind, beyond the things that are very similar. We have to start thinking, brainstorming, and thinking about a much wider set of thoughts and bringing those to mind. So when we engage in social comparison, we automatically start focusing on differences. And as we focus on differences, what happens is a broader set of thoughts start coming to our mind. We start engaging in divergent thinking. Now, one of the things that happens when we engage in divergent thinking is that things that are sort of creative and innovative and divergent start coming to our mind more easily as well. And so what the literature would suggest until now is that if we engage in social comparison, it will automatically focus us on differences, which means that we'll start brainstorming and coming up with this broad range of ideas. And as we come up with a broader range of ideas, innovative things, something that would have otherwise felt strange to us, might feel actually quite good and normal, and we might become more likely to adopt this product. So this is what the literature would suggest. And what it would further suggest is that if I engage in comparison with someone who's close to me rather than distant from me, I would be even more motivated to engage in comparison. You know, think back to all the sibling rivalries each one of us has had, right? I mean, when our sibling had something, we really wanted that thing. We really compared with them. So it just automatically, what the literature suggests is when you start seeing a post or when you start seeing something from someone who's a close other, darn that co-author of yours, when they're close to you, when they got a publication, it really hurts. But when it's someone else, hey, wow, they're so cool. So what happens is that when you see, so one of the things that we know is that when we compare with a close other, we start comparing much more. And so if a referent is close, that should lead to even more divergent thinking and even more acceptance of innovative products. That's how the logic would flow from the literature. And that would also fit with the intuition of everyone else who said that, well, if I compare with someone who's close to me, I should be going ahead and liking innovative products even more. So, and indeed, this is a little picture of Chelsea. That's her. She actually is a triathlete, and she competes. And so she often closely compares with the people she competes with. But when you look at this, everyone looks so similar. There's just no difference out here. Now, let me see. So let me be perfectly honest. These are her siblings. But even controlling for the sibling effect, there's just so much similarity out there. So if social comparison really leads to this differentiation and innovation, at least the expressions could have been a little different. No, everything is the same. So our idea is that social comparison with close others can actually reduce the desire for innovation and innovative products. When we see posts from close others as opposed to distant others, we might actually not want to go ahead and adopt an innovative product. I just made an argument that all the literature says that we should want to. But then I did show you an important piece of evidence that no, it doesn't. So here's the logic. When we engage in social comparison, yes, we do start focusing on differences. We do start thinking about rank and hierarchy and how we might be different and how we place in the social hierarchy with respect to others. But when the referent is someone close to us, this close other also informs us about our identity. They also tell us who we are. And so trying to differentiate from someone who's essentially the essence of who we are feels really, really difficult. And what comes to our mind is actually the overlap and the similarities with the close other rather than the differences. And the more we try and see ourselves as different from someone who's close, the more we actually end up seeing ourselves as closer to that other person then rather than just thinking about them or actually even thinking of similarities about them. Because there's this feeling of difficulty that makes us infer that if it's so difficult to differentiate, we must be really, really similar. It's also a little bit like the white bear paradigm that has been shown and used, one of the most classic findings in psychology, where I tell you, don't think about a white bear. And you try and suppress these thoughts of white bear. And then I release you, and bam, actually, admit it, all of you are just thinking of white bear right now, right? So it's a little bit like that. I'm trying to differentiate from a close other. And all these thoughts about similarity are coming to my mind, and I keep suppressing them. And bam, they keep coming. So trying to differentiate rather than think of similarities, or just thinking about a close other, can make us think of even more similarities with the close other. And this can lead to a cognitive narrowing. We get drawn into the short and narrow, the straight and narrow, rather than all this broad thinking that divergent thinking should do. And as a result, what happens is that we end up thinking much more schematically when we try and differentiate from someone close, because that close person is really us. We see ourselves in that person, and all the similarities become even larger. And so when we start thinking straight and narrow, we become less likely to pick up the product that they are trying to advocate. And actually, this mindset transfers over to other decisions, and we become less likely and open to other innovative products as well. So let me show you some evidence for this. One of the first things I'd like to show you, which has not been shown before, is that merely going on social media and considering a post from a relevant close other can evoke social comparison and can make the person feel more similar, and actually can influence the extent of idea generation, innovative ideas we come up with, which I call divergent thinking. Then let me show you that this process really happens when we compare and contrast with a close other, but it does not happen when we compare and contrast with a distant other. And then let me show you how this influences the desire for innovative products, not just the product that the person is talking about, but also the thoughts that are coming to mind for a completely unrelated product that they might think of. So in this first study, what Chelsea did is that we asked people, this is a fairly straightforward study, it was with undergraduate and graduate students, the millennials, they're constantly going on Facebook. We pre-selected a bunch of people who are predisposed to going on Facebook, which is basically our entire student population. And we said, why don't we just go ahead, log into Facebook? And what we'd like you to do is describe a post to us from either a close other, where they're talking about something that's relevant to you. Describe a post that's from a distant other, where they're talking about something relevant to you. And then as a control, an irrelevant post from this close other. So this is just a baseline that if you're really not thinking about something relevant, you're not really going to compare with the close other. But it's when something is relevant, then you're motivated to compare. And so this is what they do. We never told them to engage in comparison, because we wanted to ask them on their own whether they compared. And so what they do is they do that. And once they've described the post, we then just ask them straightforward. And this is sort of a manipulation check. This is sort of a process measure where we can infer what they did. We ask them, did you compare with the other person? How difficult was it to compare with the other person? If you did compare with them, what kind of difficulty did you experience? And how similar do you think you are to the other person? But our real measure of interest was, what kind of ideas do they come up with after that? Does the mere act of looking at a post from a close other that is relevant to you limit your ability to think more broadly, because now you're fixated in a very narrow way on your close other? And so the divergent thinking was, hey, here's a toothbrush, and what are all the different ways you can think of using this toothbrush? Come up with as many innovative ideas, and complete idea generation task. And then we had coders code whether they came up with something divergent or not. So if they said, I use a toothbrush to brush my teeth, I use it to design a shiv to stab people, that was all not very divergent. Apparently, a lot of people in the population want to go ahead and create a shiv. But yeah, who would guess? But something more like I would use it as a handle and tie a string to it and fly a kite with it. So that was coded as something pretty divergent and unusual. And so these are the results. First, compared to the midpoint of the scale, thinking about a relevant post, regardless of whether it's from a close or a distant other, increased social comparison. When people went ahead and simply described a post from a close other that was irrelevant, it didn't. So it does seem that people self-report to engaging in social comparison pretty spontaneously when they see any relevant post on social media. The next thing we saw was that when they compare with a close other, they say that the comparison process feels more difficult. So that is, again, interesting, because in some sense you would say that I know much more about someone who's close to me, so the comparison process should feel easy, but rather they say it feels really difficult. And this is especially difficult when they're thinking about something relevant. So this is, again, something that's showing evidence that when I compare with someone who's close to me, I find it really difficult to differentiate from that person. What we were really interested in was how many ideas they came up with. And merely looking at a post from a close other that was relevant to me reduced the number of creative ideas I came up with compared to a distant other. And actually, it only happened when they engaged in social comparison. That is when they actually were, because remember, they engaged in comparison in these two conditions, but not in this condition. And that's what lowered their idea generation. So the amount they felt difficulty, they ended up actually having a rebound effect where they focused on similarities, and that resulted in less idea generation. We ran a second study essentially to replicate this. We had a missing cell problem in the first study. So in this, we had 4 cells, actually 6. We had a close or a distant other. They named this person. We also wanted to extend this to the phenomenon of social comparison rather than just to the social media context. So we gave people explicit instructions to actually compare with this person. Or we gave them instructions to actually cooperate and think about things they could do jointly with this person to assimilate, to get similar ideas, or just didn't give them any instruction. And again, what we expected is when we compare with a close other, that is when we try and generate differences from a close other, we will end up thinking they're even more similar to us, and this similarity mindset will reduce the amount of divergent thoughts that we have. So they indicated perceived similarity, and they did a similar divergent thinking task. Here it was a brick. What would you use it for? If you use it to build a wall, that's pretty normal. If you use it to grind it up, mix the dust, and use it as paint, that's pretty unusual. So that's how we coded these results. And pretty much the same results that we saw from the past study. If it's a distant other, of course, if you think of similarities from someone who's very distant to you, you're going to think they're more similar to you than if you actually think of differences or don't think of anything. That's your default situation. But what is really interesting is when you think of differences, similarities, of course, and the baseline when you think of a close person is really that I think they're close and they're much more close than a distant person. But what is really interesting is when I try and differentiate from the close person, I end up thinking that they're even more similar to me than if I actually try to think of similarities or engage in a baseline comparison. So really trying to think of differences makes me want to go ahead and see myself as more similar. What also happens is in the idea generation task, thinking of differences from a distant other really cues a lot of differences. So it seems that they engage in very creative thinking. But when they think of differences from the close other, which corresponded with them having a similarity mindset, they end up actually generating few interesting and innovative ideas. So now this suggests that they have a very narrow mindset. Trying to differentiate from a close other leads us to a rebound effect where we actually become more averse or risk averse to new innovative ideas. At least we cannot create them. We wanted to test this. Remember I said this is about innovation and innovation acceptance. So we said, why not actually test it with a product? And so we had people log into Facebook again, and we said, hey, this is a post. Now imagine that this has come from a close other or a distant other. And we said that, so what we expect is that if it's from a close other, they're going to look at it, they're automatically going to compare with the person, and this comparison process is going to make them feel more similar to the person and not want an innovative product that the person is talking about. But if this is really about feeling it's very difficult to differentiate from the person, which is leading to this white bear effect where I'm only thinking about similarity, if we distract them by saying, hey, that difficulty is caused by something else, it's really not caused by the similarity process, that will tell them that they don't have to start focusing on these differences anymore. They can actually, maybe they are different, and they would perhaps be released from thinking and trapped about differences. So that's what we did. We just had the baseline condition, what we've been having, and we had a misattribution condition where we said, hey, you might feel that it's difficult, but it's because, we've just given you very complicated instructions, and so it's really not that you're finding it's difficult and you make that attribution. It must be because I'm so similar, and then I start thinking about similarity with the close other. And then we asked them how much they want the watch, that product, and we also go ahead and expose them to some advertising for Tide Pods. This study was done before people started thinking that Tide Pods are gourmet delicacy. So if people did think it's a washing product, we framed it as either an innovative solution to your washing laundry needs or your classic product that you always use for your laundry needs, and we had some information in both the ads. We just told them to view the ads, and then later on we gave them a surprise memory task because we wanted to see what they spontaneously looked at if we gave them this information. So we did not ask them to choose this because choice could have influenced what they then remembered through a motivated reasoning process. So we didn't do that. We just let them see. So first thing what we found is replication of what we expected, that in the close condition, if you really let them just look at a post from a close rather than a distant other, they don't want that Apple Watch that that person was speaking about. So again, it's really counterintuitive, and it seems to be more consistent with the idea that if I start trying to differentiate on social media from a close other, I end up seeing them as more similar, and I don't really want anything that is innovative. If I release them from that, that effect goes away. Also, we gave them a surprise recall task in the second Tide Pod example. And what we found is that in this situation, they actually had more ideas, they had more recall. We said, can you recall whatever they had seen both the ads? We said, just recall whatever you can see, remember from both these ads. And then we coded how many elements they recalled from the innovative ad versus the classic ad. And what we found again is that if they had seen a post initially from a distant other, they recalled more elements from the innovative ad compared to if they'd seen an ad, that post from a close other for the Apple Watch. So it had nothing to do with Tide. They remembered fewer innovative and more tradition-related aspects from the ad. So it seems that being trapped in thinking about similarity and trying to say, hey, I don't want to feel so similar to the other person, really influences what you pay attention to later on. This effect sort of went away when we told them, don't focus on this too much. So really, the effect was happening here. And the idea is, when we start comparing with a close other, when we try to differentiate from them, we end up seeing ourselves much more similar. We end up looking at things that are much more traditional, and we end up not liking innovative products. So in conclusion, here are some key insights that I'd like you to take away. First, we saw that social media leads spontaneously to social comparison. Second, what we saw is that especially when the social comparison is a close rather than a distant other, we end up seeing that person even more similar to if we actually just think of someone who's close to us, or we actually think of why we are close to that person. So trying to see differences leads us to see more similarities, and seeing more similarities then makes us trapped in this way of thinking just in terms of similarities and reduces the scope of what we think. So the basic point here is who we compare with matters. And when we focus on trying to differentiate from close others, we end up seeing ourselves more similar. So what should companies do that are interested in promoting innovative products? I think Nike is a wonderful example. They might be doing this spontaneously, but what they do is make the referent actually an athlete. It's not someone close to me whom I compete with on running on a daily basis, which I don't do, but it's really an athlete. And I think thinking about and engaging in social comparison with someone who's actually an upward referent and quite distant can be pretty good for the firm. Here's another example from L'Oreal. And what they do is they have an intranet. So this is called #life@L'Oreal. And what they do is they encourage people to post things about themselves on the website to go ahead and improve employee satisfaction in the organization. And again, our research is very consistent with this, that if you post this online, people might automatically socially compare with these close others, and they'll end up feeling even more similar to them. Of course, what we would be really interested in finding out from L'Oreal is, did the creative idea generation tank after they did this? Thank you so much.